kind of just call histories mysteries. Um, I call it that just because I find it funny. Um, and let me give you the starting point for this particular topic. I've had this exact thing said to me. Let me bring up the words here so I can quote it for you. Um, People from ancient times were crazy, and it's hard to believe in the Bible because it was written by crazy ancient people. Okay, so that's the quote. That's the start off point for things like this, and it's kind of reinforced by certain things that we do hear often. We hear it in school, and we hear it just in general conversation. The idea that ancient people were superstitious and they didn't understand the world around them and they didn't have science and anytime something would happen they had to make up an explanation for it and that does made up explanations are where we get theology from. Um, we have examples such as like ancient Greek and Roman sort of mythologies where you have particular gods that are attributed each thing. Lightning was one god, thunder, rain, crops, everything had its own particular delegate god that made that all possible, and that those things were just people reaching out for explanations in a world that they didn't understand. And this is something that I think is very much over exaggerated and just kind of silly. Don't get me wrong here. Obviously, I'm not a historian, and I don't have detailed notes on each ancient civilization. I'm sure that there are places and peoples that may have fit this particular stereotype. There's probably people in indigenous places, even to this day, that have what we might consider a strange outlook on certain things and explanations that include more superstitious or uh, what we might not consider a valid explanation for why things happen, wind and rain and earthquakes and that sort of stuff. Um, but while it's true that I'm sure that there are people or civilizations that did lean more towards that direction, we are also talking about what are literally the building blocks of our current society. The things that we do know today are based on the things that they figured out way back then. And it's a progressive sort of situation. Um, it's true that they didn't have microscopes or that sort of thing, 2,000 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or whatever. But at the same time, they were not fools, and they were able to easily observe the things around them. They may not, as I said, been able to identify a particular pathogen as being responsible for particular symptoms, but they did know sick, and they did know herbal medicine, and they did know, broken bones, and they did have, even though they were not quite as advanced as they are today, it was the fact that they figured out rudimentary ways of dealing with these with what they had available that eventually gave the next generation something to build upon and then create more and more and more sophisticated techniques of taking care of certain diseases or injuries better. And this is true in not just medical science, but in all kinds of science and mathematics, so just society in general. These are all things that came to us from antiquity. And even though they didn't have smartphones at the time, they certainly developed the types of things that we now use smartphone applications to, automate for us. And as a matter of fact, if you want to be really honest, there's a lot of things that we do on a daily basis with some kind of a device that if electricity or that device was deprived us, we would be totally helpless. Whereas somebody from an older generation or from antiquity would have easily been able to do on their own because that's exactly how they were used to doing it in the first place. In addition to that, we also have shows and documentaries all over the place now, articles that have to do with, just how did they do this? How did they build this? How did they figure this out? Because there are people currently with modern day technology that can't figure out how to build certain structures or um, different especially architectural and engineering feats that we're perplexed by today, but yet these are things that are thousands of years old. We know from these bits of information that our ancestors were not superstitious fools. They were not hiding in a cave afraid of light, and then just came out eventually, and then now we all of a sudden have this society that we have now. No, these people were very clever. They were not foolish. They were not superstitious. And so the question becomes, at least in my mind, how is it that we have a civilization thousands of years old, obviously not the same one, but progressive civilizations passing information on, innovating new things, inventing new things. We have mathematics, astronomy, physics. We have engineering. We have even societal things, banking. Government systems. All these things that were developed in antiquity throughout the generations, throughout the thousands of years of human civilization. But all of a sudden, if somebody says something from any one of these time periods that has to do with God, that has to do with the Bible, that offers any credence to what the Bible says, that identifies a place that the Bible also identifies, that notates the observation of a biblical event or of a miraculous event, well, then all of a sudden they're just superstitious and they didn't know what they were looking at, and they lived in a world they didn't understand, and that everything, had this, they had this need to create some kind of an explanation to understand what they just had no possible means of understanding. That doesn't line up for me. They're not fools half the time and brilliant the other half. This same phenomena is even present today, where you have, scientists that have, just this huge list of degrees and accolades, and they are no recognized as experts in their field, and they are coming up with the new and the groundbreaking ideas and the methods of looking at things, and they're just shifting paradigms all over the place. But yet, if it should come to light that they are a creationist or that they believe in God, well, then all of a sudden all their achievements are somehow devalued. They're disqualified now. They're not real scientists after all. How could a scientist believe in God? Does anybody ever think the other way around? How do we ignore the fact that a brilliant person believes in God rather than just assuming that they must not be brilliant because they believe in God or the Bible? This, like I said, I think it's a mystery. It's silly. I think most people don't think about it, even people that are talking about it. That you can't have both. You can't have a society full or a history full of societies that were just too silly to make any real observation or any reliable observance, but yet somehow still have the society that we do today. If you were to remove any major society from our history, that would, of course, move us back technologically by however much time or however much they put into society. It's like cutting the center out of a tree. That tree is now shorter. So obviously, these people contributed to what we have today, because this progressive system is where technology comes from. It starts with this idea, it starts with a sundial or something like that. And then over time, it becomes, a watch, and then a digital clock. And then, now we have cell phones and that kind of stuff that tell time. I mean, the whole concept of even, starting this was thousands of years ago. So, I mean, to disqualify historical people as being, foolish is ridiculous. And there's a lot of information I have in the notes that kind of expound what I'm talking about. And most people who are familiar with history know these types of things. This is not, this is just not an accurate way to look at things. And if somebody or some people or a civilization can be trusted so far as we have history books and we have mathematics books, and we have all kinds of academic textbooks that come from the information gathered from ancient historians and from people who studied these ancient civilizations. If that information's good enough, then why is it not good enough what they have to say when it comes to the Bible?